For years, I've been studying and purchasing properties both for my own use as lifestyle properties and for investments all around the world. Today, I'm going to walk you through some of the criteria that I consider when buying a property to live in overseas. So here's how I do it, just so you understand where I'm coming from. I have rented in the past overseas. Right now, I buy. I like the control that maintains. I pay cash. Debt is either very difficult to get, it's not worth the hassle, and it's just not something that I want personally. I also generally, if I can qualify and I don't already have residence or citizenship in a country, I may use real estate to get a second residence permit or even get a citizenship, or at least help support a case for one of those if it's a residence or citizenship that I want. And certainly I would like to have at least residence in any place where I buy property to make sure that I can get into the country and I have a higher level status than a tourist. So with that being said, I'm going to walk you through my criteria for buying property overseas. If it's your first time here, my name's Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally reduce their taxes, diversify and protect their assets, get second citizenship, and yes, even buy property all around the world. I'm also the host of the biggest and best offshore conference called Nomad Capitalist Live, open to absolutely everybody. And I'm going to assume, for purpose of this, that you know where you want to buy. Obviously, there's a whole separate way to determine, where you want to buy property. My personal choice has been, I will be somewhat motivated by if a place has a tax incentive, even though most properties that I have, I'm not really spending enough time to where I would be taxed, so it's irrelevant. But it's a nice thing to have just to build my optionality. I don't happen to own property in a place like Dubai, for example, where I have a residence permit. I like to diversify. I like to spend my life in different parts of the world, just as a lifestyle benefit. And so you need to figure out kind of your perspective. Are you looking for one home? Are you looking for 2 homes? We had one guy, he's like, I'm going to split my time between 8 places. That's a pretty aggressive schedule. But I can tell you it's a lot easier if you're just moving between places that you control. You've set them up. It's obviously a bit more to maintain, but it is a different experience traveling between properties that you own. So the first thing I'm looking for when I'm buying a property is price. I am not someone, because I am security minded, who just pays top dollar. So I decided back during the pandemic, having a home in Istanbul, which is basically my global hub for air traffic, wouldn't be the worst idea. And so I said, okay, I know at least I can get a residence permit, and if I want the citizenship, I can get it. But my favorite neighborhood, Nishantashi, which I think is a good international neighborhood to buy in, where you're going to hold value better than other neighborhoods in international currency terms like the dollar. You could buy on the high street where Prada and Louis Vuitton and all that are. You're not going to find that much. A lot of the stuff that's offered is off market or gets snatched up quickly by a plastic surgeon. It's just a fortune. I mean, there's a property that I got shown, one of the rare, new properties that comes on that main street, like $10,000 a square meter. Meanwhile, you can go other parts of the city and buy for $1,000, and in this neighborhood, you're probably buying $2,000 to $3,000. So am I going to pay 3 to 4, 5 times the price to be on a street that's a couple hundred meters away? No, I am not. What I am going to be concerned about, though, is if I'm qualifying for residence or citizenship, I'm not going to buy just to meet the minimum. I've made this mistake before where it's like, okay, hey, you need to spend this amount of money. And you're like, okay, well, why would I pay more? I'm going for the residence or citizenship. And so I've made the mistake where it's like thinking, oh, this will just be a place for the residents and, we'll just kind of let it sit, or we'll let people use it or whatever. And then it's like you go there, or your spouse goes there, and you're like, we really like it here. Like, let's spend some time here. And then you bought a property where you spent the minimum. So I think don't let kind of government directives, get you to spend the minimum. If you literally just want the citizenship or the residence or whatever that comes with it, or you want it as an investment property, then that's a different story. But if you're not sure how much of a lifestyle property you're going to make it, then you want to be careful that you don't spend the minimum. So, things like, do I want to spend less, but I'm going to get lower ceilings, for example. Some of you have seen an example where I had that. So I'm looking for a price per square meter for the neighborhood. I'm looking for a deal because we have a real estate team here and we have a network around the world. We do, kind of search on the ground using local resources. For example, I'm here in Serbia, bought a property, and it was on none of the Western websites. And it's prime location, and it was just not available anywhere that you would find if you only spoke English. So you want to have people in the local market employed to help you. The more developing the market, the less likely you're going to find anything on an English language website that's a good price. So price is what I'm looking for. I don't want to underpay in the actual dollar terms just because of a residence or citizenship requirement, but I'm looking for a good price per square meter for the neighborhood. The second thing that I'm going to look for is the building itself. So for me, I've basically built a collection of pied-à-terres, as one of my friends called it. If you're looking for a house, if you're looking for a villa, if you're looking for what they would call in Malaysia a landed property, then that's going to be a little bit different scenario. But if you want to, lock up and go, and you want to live this international lifestyle, whether it's a second home, a winter home, or you've got a collection, I'm going to buy in a building. Particularly because in places like Colombia, for example, I was talking to a friend of mine. He's like, "Oh yeah, my parents have a home, and they went on a vacation for a year, for a week, and they came back, and their VCR or whatever it is that they had inside was gone, and so the apartment obviously makes it easier to do that. What am I looking for? I'm generally looking for older buildings these days. Now, obviously, when you go to Europe, you might find a building that's 100 years old. You might have plumbing issues. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in Bogota, for example. I've got a building. I'm in a neighborhood that probably was finished developing. I mean, they're still building the occasional new thing, but it was done 20 years ago. And so my building is 35 years old. And what do I get? I am the youngest person that lives there, which is good because people care and they keep it up. Whereas I bought in a building once where it was mostly Airbnb tenants. It was a bunch of young people. It was kind of a sexy looking building where you had like young guys who just wanted to meet women and stuff. And there's a direct correlation. When you get kind of a more subdued building that's maybe not quite as shiny, I've seen like literally nicer guards. They care about you. Like they bring stuff upstairs for you. Oh, you're out of town? I stored it for you. I had a situation once like, oh, the guy's like, don't worry, it's safe and secure at my home. And whenever you come back, let me know and I will bring it to you. And like this guard had been working at the building for 25 years. And now I see that in my new place in Malaysia, where again, I think I'm on the younger end of the spectrum of who lives there. And it's nice. It's not quite as flashy as some of the new stuff. It's 12 or 13 years old, which in Asia is kind of a little bit older. But I'm avoiding all the people who encourage the guards to be very difficult or encourage the building management to not care. They don't fix stuff. I mean, you want to live in a place with some pride of ownership, I guess, is the simple way to do it. The third thing I'm looking for is in the places that I'm going, by and large, I'm looking for things that are in bad condition, the actual property itself, okay? Now, if you're buying in a very expensive market, for me, if I'd lived in somewhere in Western Europe, I would choose to live in Dublin, Ireland, and I was in Dublin, Ireland. I've been there many times, and you look at, there's plenty of well-renovated property that you can just move into, especially when you start paying, 3, 4, 5 million euros, you just, move in. That's not really the case in a lot of the up-and-coming places where you can get residence or citizenship, where you can reduce your cost of living, where you have, low taxes. And so you want to go to Tbilisi, Georgia. You want to go, okay, Bogota, Colombia, there's actually some decent inventory. But a lot of the places, especially in Eastern Europe, a lot of the places that, like in Asia, you're just not going to like people's tastes, or just, you're going to pay such a premium because there's not enough inventory. So I'm looking for stuff that basically stinks. And so I don't want to like adapt something to my taste. I want to feel that I'm not wasting anything. Like if I ever go in and do a renovation, there's something to salvage, I ask them like, hey, can you like donate this to someone? Can you find somewhere? I don't want to just throw stuff away. But I'm trying to find stuff where it's just so terrible that I don't mind throwing it away because everything's literally crumbling and therefore I get a lower price and I can negotiate. I think it's a much better strategy. Now the challenge is, having managed so many renovations around the world, I can tell you, you have to be on your toes. And, I have found some good renovation contractors around the world, somewhat by trial and error. And obviously there's a cultural difference that you have to explain. So you have to manage all that. And if you're not living there, it's a little bit harder to manage. I've done a lot of remote renovation jobs and it probably could have turned out a lot worse. But you have to be able to manage all that. But that said, you can obviously add some value where you come in and buy something. Just if you're doing like a fix and flip where you live, fix and flips aren't as much of a thing in many parts of the world. But you can basically know that you're going to have a little bit of extra equity at the end because you went through the effort, and the lifestyle benefit was you got to develop to your taste without having to rip apart a perfectly good place. The fourth thing I'm looking for is layout, and again, I'm trying to think long term. In that, like, I think a lot of people, they go overseas and they think like this may not be a place that we spend that much time, or maybe they're not sure, whether they're going to be having kids. Or we've worked with a number of single people over the years where they're like, I'm not sure if I'm going to get married, and then they go to some country and it's like, I really fit in here, so now I'm going to get married. And it's like you want to plan ahead for where could you go. And so what's the layout in terms of how many bedrooms? I think people probably put too much effort into guest bedrooms, for example, where I've met numerous friends around the world who are like, we thought our friends would come and visit us, and in 10 years, one person came. So I'm not putting too much effort into guest rooms. You shouldn't, perhaps. I do, just because I guess I enjoy having a guest room and just looking at an empty room. But if you plan on having a bigger family, if you plan on having your family come with you, if you plan on here's one thing I've seen: people have adult children or they have adult parents, obviously, and those people aren't interested in joining your international journey, or maybe they have siblings and they're like, oh, you're kind of crazy. I've seen where eventually they see you living overseas and they're like, oh, we want to come with you. And maybe their first place is they're going to come and spend time at your house, or maybe you want to share that. I mean, there's so many different layout issues you could have, but like, think long term. Don't make the mistake of like, oh, I'm not going to be here that often. Also think about what's good for your business. The idea that I'll just put a little desk in the corner of a one-bedroom apartment, and that's going to be a place where I'm going to want to sit long-term when I live in the U.S. and I have a 3,000 square foot house, and I'm going to live in this tiny little seaside place with just a little cheap desk. Like, you're not going to like that. You're not going to be productive. You're not going to want to go there, and it's just not going to work out. You're not going to want to run your business from there. So I would think about layout. And I've kind of learned that lesson where it's like really put a lot of effort last time in like a really beautiful office that I love. It's like separate and it's just in its own wing, and it's just, I'm not in like a broom closet we converted to an office. I'm not like putting it's an office, and I properly did it, which was for me a challenge because I'm just like, all right, like if I'm only here for a month, can't I just struggle? And it's like, no, don't struggle. Have the layout you want. And then lastly, more space than you need is something. Again, don't assume that like we won't be here a lot. Maybe you'll fall in love with the place. And if the goal, I think for a lot of people, is buying property overseas as a conduit to greater interaction with internationalization. So, it's a great first step. For some people, it could just be opening a bank account and putting $1,000. But if you have the money and you want to like get on track towards citizenship, for example, buy property in Colombia, get permanent residence. One person can, with a few other conditions met, get citizenship in 5 years, and you don't have to be there very much. You have to learn Spanish, but there's a few other things to do. But Colombia is not necessarily a super tax-friendly place to move, but what if you could like use Colombia as a base to explore other places in Latin America and start building your tax plan, start building your whole international plan, because you use that home as a place to spend a few months a year. If you don't go there because you have like this cramped place and you didn't put effort into the layout, then that's going to be a problem, and you're just not going to use it to its full capacity, even if you get the citizenship eventually. And so I'm going to go in with a renovation plan. I'm going to have my partners, I'm going to have my timelines. I'm going to basically put the whole plan together up front, because so many people are going to try in the renovation space, are just going to try and go in a wing and a prayer. You've got to understand that if you're coming from a country where things are very organized. I will say in Colombia, things are more than you would think very organized. And I have one of probably the best renovation guys who is, he measures every millimeter of every socket on every wall, and it's like super organized. But in most countries, it's like, I'm sure we'll figure it out. All right, let's just get to work. And then you're late, and then you're over budget, which happens everywhere. But I want to have that full plan up front, which is not something that everyone's used to. It seems to me that in the US, you have a plan and a budget and everything else, and then they still just don't stick to it. Whereas in other countries, they're just not used to such formal planning, and you're just kind of going in, and it's just casual, and then you just, it's kind of a hassle, especially if you're not there kind of managing it. So I'm going to have more space than I need. I'm going to have a full plan of what I want to do. I'm going to have my Pinterest board set up what I want it to look like. And for me, what I'm really looking to create in a space, and if you want to hear more about this, by the way, and kind of how I decorate it and create lifestyle plans, leave a comment below. I want to have a place where I know I can feel comfortable working, because I'm a big believer that anyone who is a creator, entrepreneur, investor, anybody like that, you need to have an environment that's conducive to that. That, to me, is the benefit of buying properties versus staying in an Airbnb where you just got these large swaths of white walls. I don't know. For me, no matter how much I would spend within reason on Airbnbs and stuff like that, I just never got kind of a vibe that I felt comfortable with. And so you can do that in your own property. You can get residence or citizenship. You can diversify your portfolio, by the way, if you're concerned about your country not being the best place to invest. You can potentially rent it out when you're not there if you want to, but those are the criteria that I'm looking for. By the way, I don't rent out my properties when I'm not there, because I don't want people screwing with my stuff. So I'll add another thing that I'm looking for in terms of more space than I need, more storage space than I need. I think we often underestimate, especially us guys, underestimate how much storage space you need. And for me, as someone who wants to create a wardrobe, I just leave it there and I just arrive to it and it's okay, that's the climate, this is what I need, this is the vibe, I'm doing business there, or it's a resort, or whatever. It's all ready for me. I want to make sure I have the space to store that wardrobe. I want to make sure I have space to store the various things that you're going to need in a house, from dishwasher tablets to toilet paper, whatever else. Where am I going to put that stuff? Because again, I think if you're a creator and you have toilet paper like hanging on your balcony or something, like it's just not really the right vibe to get you motivated to create. And so having the space to do that and thinking through like all the nooks and crannies, being thoughtful about going in, that's what I'm looking for when I'm trying to choose homes to live in overseas. It goes well beyond just the price.